Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry for a few minutes late. The House Education Administration Committee, we have a full calendar today, but members may take some bills out of order because we got some guest speakers and some of our members have to leave early. Well, I think we got is it a basketball game tonight? Representative Cochran? You reckon? Okay. Well, let's have the clerk call the roll, then we get into all that. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Representatives Baum, Carringer, Cassida, Sapicki, Clemens, Cochran, Darby, Gillespie, Hakeem, Haston, Lafferty, Love, Parkinson, Reagan, Vice Chairman Hurt, Chairman White.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, anybody you want to recognize or comment or announcement you want to make before we get started? Seeing none, hearing none. Okay, I'm going to ask Representative Chris Hurt if he would start us out. We always like to begin our session with a prayer since we represent the children across the state and we need that divine guidance. Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bow with me, please. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and we thank you for the opportunity to be here, dear Lord. We thank you for each and every one of the individuals in this room and everything you've blessed us with. We thank you for the privilege of living in the state of Tennessee and all that comes with it, dear Lord. Please be with us as we make important decisions on this committee today and throughout the rest of the year. And please be with us, watch over each and every one of our students, teachers, administrators, all of our schools throughout our state, dear Lord. And we pray that your will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, members, we're going to start with item 1 to begin with, House Bill 2157. We got a motion and a second. Representative Gant, you're at the well. Do you have an amendment that we need to consider?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. There is, in the amendment code is 016089, I believe.
That's what we have. Thank you very much. Now, I understand this rewrites the bill.
That is correct.
So, members, any objection to add an amendment? I don't think he's not going to carry it. Motion second on the amendment. Any objection to adding it to the bill? Hearing none, those in favor adding 16089 to House Bill 2157 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, you're on your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In committee, I'll start out describing what the amendment does. The first thing is it makes a technical change such as editing University of Tennessee, Knoxville to University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Clarification of, the second thing is clarification of administrative and oversight roles of the UTK Chancellor versus the UT President. The Chancellor provides administrative support for direct search. Chancellor appoints a director from the list of finalists provided by the board. The President designates chair of the board. It also adds a requirement for the Institute to provide programming for the UT system. Changes the Board of Fellows appointments from requiring the governor and the speaker's approval to requiring the consultation with the governor and speakers. And it also, at the end, adds staggered terms for the Board of Fellows. And as a whole, what this legislation does is it creates an Institute for American Civics at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. The Institute will initially be housed at the Baker Center at UT Knoxville and will operate as an academic unit within the University of Tennessee. The Institute may enroll students into a degree-granting program, provide general education courses to other students at the University of Tennessee, hire faculty and staff, host events, and provide internships and other relevant experiences to students and the general public. The Institute will foster a deeper understanding of the structures and institutions of federal, state, and local government. It also furthers the understanding of principles and philosophies that contributed to the foundation and development of the United States, the state of Tennessee. It also will promote civil discourse and constructive debate. When's the last time we heard of something like that in our higher education system. Promote civil discourse and constructive debate. It also enhances education in fields of politics, economics, philosophy, American history, American government, and other related fields as appropriate. With a focus on the rights and responsibilities of American citizenship, fundamental democratic principles, and how these principles are expressed in our federal, state, and local institutions. It also provides nonpartisan resources to students, faculty, state government, agencies, and the general public regarding civic affairs. It also fosters civic engagement through full and fair discussion that is intentional in promoting civil dialogue among those holding conflicting points of view. It also will assist in ensuring that the University of Tennessee serves as a robust marketplace of ideas for all students and faculty. The bill requires the UT president with the approval, and this goes back to the amendment with the going from approval to consultation, to appoint a 13-member board of fellows for the Institute by September of 2022, of which 9 must be professors or administrators at U.S. higher education institutions. 2 must be former appointed or elected officials from different political parties, and 2 must be members of the board of the Baker Center. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think that gives you a pretty good summary of what this legislation does. And this is an initiative that is being brought by our governor, Governor Bill Lee. And I'm proud to stand here before you today to present this for your consideration today. And I will say that this has been a bipartisan piece of legislation that's supported by Republicans and Democrats. And I hope that that is the continued path that we stay on, because that's the whole objective of this, is to bring a better understanding of the principles and philosophies that contributed to the foundation and development of our institutions here in the state of Tennessee. So with
Thank
that,
you.
Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
Thank you, Leader Gant.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Members,
sorry.
members, you have, with that explanation by Leader Gant, open for discussion. And the question's been called. Do I have any objections to that? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2157 to Finance, Ways, and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves out, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
Okay, do we have House Bill 2455, HB 2455 by Representative Tim Hicks? You're recognizing the well.
The department, I've been blessed to be able to work with them on this, and we have an untimely filed amendment that we would really like to get on this bill. It makes a great bill even greater, so we would really like to put it on there.
Thank you very much. And I see where that would be Amendment 16328.
That would be
Is that
it.
what you have?
Yes.
Would you go ahead? We had a motion to consider, motion to second, consider any objections? Hearing none, we're now here. Bill, would you go ahead and describe to us what this amendment says?
The amendment adds to, in Section C, provides proof of pairing with a highly effective mentor teacher and completion of coursework in classroom management, pedagogy, serving students with disabilities and English learners, and the Teacher's Code of Ethics. So it just adds in there, provide proof of pairing with highly effective mentor teachers and completion of coursework.
Got a motion to have a second on the amendment. For one, I appreciate you working with DOE on this. I love your bill. I think we need to get more CTE teachers into our young people, but working with DOE to clarify some things is good. Members, discussion on the amendment. Is there any objection to adding this amendment onto the bill? I hear no objection. All those in favor of adding Amendment 16328 on the House Bill 2455 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Your amendment has on your bill. Any further discussion on your bill?
No, sir.
Question's been called. Do I have an objection to that question? Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2455 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Item number 3, Hardaway. I don't see him in here. I see where that did die in the Senate, but he may not be running. We'll roll that. You're going to carry it for him? Okay, you know it's not moving in the Senate. Okay, it's y'all's bill. I recognize you. Representative Love, you're recognized on House Bill 2814. What do you want to do?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do so enjoy running bills in committee. However, when given the chance not to, I will also afford myself that opportunity. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I will take this bill off notice.
Without objection, House Bill 2814 is off notice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you. We also have House Bill 2816 by Chairman Hardaway, and he's not here. Chairman Love.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I don't have control of this particular piece of legislation. However, I think that we can roll it because it's in general sub also, I think, in the Senate.
Sir, say that last thing.
I think it's in general sub also in the Senate, and I don't know what.
It has. It's been general subbed in the Senate. And without objection, since Reverend Hardaway's not here, I am going to take this off notice.
Thank you.
Item number 5 by Chair Lady Moody, House Bill 650. You have a motion and a second. And when you get settled in, give us the amendment you're working off of.
All right. That amendment code is 014369.
That's correct. It does rewrite the bill. You got a motion and a second. Members, any objection to adding it to the bill before we discuss the bill? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding amendment 14369 to House Bill 650 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're now back on your bill. You may describe your bill.
All right. So just, y'all probably know this, but just for to lay the groundwork, the State Building Commission is tasked with overseeing construction of all state public buildings, including construction impacting Tennessee institutions of higher education. So what this amendment does, it will provide that that any policy the State Building Commission sets concerning capital projects impacting THAC, that every project will come before the State Building Commission for consideration. And again, it's appropriate that the State Building Commission provide parameters that THEC will use when bringing such projects before the State Building Commission. If there's any, I'll hush in case there's questions or.
Okay, now that Chair Lady Moody is hushed, any questions?
Hush. It's
Okay.
a Southern term.
Any discussion, any comments? Question's been called by Representative Spicky. Any objection to that question? Hearing none. All those in favor of House Bill 650 going to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank
Chair Lady.
you, everybody. Thank you.
Item 6, HB 2436 for Chairman Farmer. You got a motion and a second on your bill.
Thank you, members.
Give us your amendment.
Yes, sir. How does 15658, does that sound right?
That's perfect.
Okay. That
Got a
amendment
motion and a
does make the
second?
bill.
It rewrites the bill.
It does.
Okay, members, any objection to adding it to the amendment for proper discussion, to the bill, I mean? Didn't hear any objections. So all those in favor of 15658 being added to House Bill 2436 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Go ahead and describe what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, and what I'm trying to do with this piece of legislation is this, that if a student finishes high school and graduates in their junior year, that they can go ahead and take advantage of the scholarship money. I believe it's the Hope Scholarship there. Currently, there's not a mechanism for them to go ahead and take that scholarship money and go ahead and move forward to college. And this would fix that. So that's my intent behind this legislation, to allow these kids that's worked really hard to graduate early, to go ahead and move forward without their parents having to take out loans or find some other ways to go ahead and fund their first year of college. And the last thing I want to do is have a student that's worked really hard, to have to sit out a year because they may lose focus and not move forward like they planned. So that's what this legislation is intended to do.
Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just want to thank you for bringing this. I will be in total support. And just real quick, of course, Hope Scholarship wasn't around when my daughter was in high school. She ended up leaving high school December of her senior year. She just turned 17 because she had taken everything, had 4 point something grade point average, just like her mother. And why you all think that's funny? Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, I will very, very proud to say no, she took after her father, but she's very sociable like her mother. So there, she got both of it. So anyway, she ended up graduating in December because there was nothing else. And the guidance counselors tried to talk her out of that the summer before she started her senior year, even tried to get her to take ROTC, all kinds of courses that, she had not been involved in or whatever, just to keep her in. And she said no. And she started UT in January of her senior year in high school. And she had 15 hours of credit by the time she graduated from Central High School and graduated in 3 years with another 4 point top of her at University of Tennessee. But I say that because there are a lot of her other friends were like that. I say that this is, to me, I think a great bill, and it's a great encourager for those students that have done all and they want to move on to that next step. And as she said, I don't want to waste any time. She was our real our real strong-willed child that was ready to get on with life and her studies and all. So thank you for bringing this. I'm total in support for it.
Thank you. Representative Hakeem. Question's been called for. Any objection? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2436 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Item 7, House Bill 2249 by Chairman Vaughn, who represents that other place down in Shelby County other than Germantown. You're recognized, sir. Got a motion and a second. Do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir. That amendment code is 016127.
Hold on one second. I've got a different one. Okay, sorry. It was a timely filed amendment. I'm turn over to this one right here. Get my paperwork in order. Okay, this amendment does rewrite the bill. Chairman Vaughn. Members, rewrites the bill. Any objection to adding it to the bill for proper discussion? Hear no objection. We're on Amendment 16127. All those in favor of adding it to House Bill 2249 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, when we brought forward our NIL, or name, image, and likeness compensation bill for collegiate athletes, we were in the first 10% of the nation who did so. The ability to do that was brought about by a court case brought by Ed O'Bannon, who did not like his image being on video games and him not being compensated for him. He's an athlete out of UCLA. We addressed a lot of those issues last year, but you learn as you go. And so what this amendment to this bill, or this, bill now, does is it allows our student athletes to engage in group licensing so we can bring back the NCAA 2014 video game. And our Tennessee Volunteers and Memphis Tigers and Vanderbilt Commodores you can pick the team of your choosing, provided that we get all of that worked out, perhaps even the Tennessee State Tigers. So that's one portion of this bill. The other is that it prevents parents from having to be registered as sports agents. We didn't believe that was appropriate. And then the final thing that this bill does, and it's just a little minor piece, it prohibits athletic associations from interfering in NIL activity protected under this statute and therefore impacting athletes' eligibility or full participation unless those students have committed a violation of either institutional or association rules. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, members, with that explanation from Chairman Vaughn, got a couple of questions. Representative Chairman Sapicki.
Not so much as a question. As you all know, I have a youngster that's being recruited to play college sports, so I'll be conflicted out on this. I'll request the clerk record me as present. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Vaughn, for this bill. You've worked on it hard and long, and I think it was worth the effort. I want to, I guess, somewhat mix apples and oranges with you. I've been told, I might have read it, there's some discussion, not with us, about high school athletes. And do you feel like there's a bridge too far for us to, anyone to be considering that kind of thing?
You recognize?
Well, we're not contemplating that today,
Right.
Representative Hakeem. I have my own personal views on that issue. But at some point in time, the team on the front of the jersey's got to matter more than the team on the back. And I think secondary sports is a great opportunity to do that. Although I will say that I believe the sports, the Tennessee's secondary sports situation in Tennessee deserves a real hard look at some of the things that are going on in that. And I will endeavor to be looking at that during this offseason. But it does not involve compensation to athletes.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and sponsor. I appreciate you bringing the bill, but under free legal advice here, I was advised I need to not vote. So I need to take my name off the roll there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else conflicted out? Representative Haston.
My fifth grader averaged 2 points per game this year. He did have some pretty good fouls, but I will be going ahead and voting on this bill today.
Representative Clemens.
Well, Haston took my line, but I was just curious what sport Darby's being recruited for.
You recognize Representative Darby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a long time ago, but kids are being recruited, but thank you.
If I may add, out of order, Representative Darby's daughter, UT Women's, they're still in the NCAA. Congratulations on that. Yeah. Really? Okay. Excellent. I spent more time on the bench than anybody, so I can vote on this. Representative Vaughn, any further discussion?
No, sir, but I would like to give a shout out to Bolivar Central High Tigers, who made another appearance at the state tournament this year. So awful proud of the alma mater.
Okay. Representative Parkson, you have anything to say?
I was going to say something about bill jacking, but I won't say anything. Good bill. Appreciate you.
Okay, members, anything else on House Bill 2249? Question been called. Any objection? All those in favor of moving House Bill 2249 out to calendar and rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item 8, House Bill 2774 by Representative Todd. You got a motion and a second. Let's see. You have one amendment, maybe?
Yes, sir. Drafting code 14923.
Okay, 14923, members. It doesn't appear to rewrite the bill. Members, would you like to add to the amendment or discuss it before we add it to the bill? Okay, we got a motion and a second on the amendment. All those in favor of adding amendment 14923 to House Bill 2774 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, your bill is amended. Go ahead and give us a description of what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, there are a lot of federal dollars that are being sent down to states for various reasons. And all this bill does is it sets up a framework for us to be able to utilize some federal dollars once they are available. And that's all it does as far as money goes. It's not taking any state funds whatsoever. And the amendment clarified that this is only subject to available funds from the federal government through these programs. It creates the Most Opportunities for Students in Tennessee Act, or the MOST Act. It's an educational grant program to combat the learning loss challenges that our students and families have experienced during the pandemic. The Department of Education received federal ARP dollars and ESSER dollars that do two things. They support school districts in their expenditure of federal ARP funds and combat learning loss due to COVID-19. This legislation seeks to support the second goal, essentially closing the gap between the Department of Education, who holds these federal dollars, and public school students who need those dollars to combat their learning loss. This will be administered by the Department of Education. The MOST program provides grants to families for eligible education expenses for low-income students in grades K through 8 for things such as tutoring service, instructional materials, and access to other courses and educational therapy. Some among those eligible education expenses, they are defined as tutoring services, which has to meet the requirements established by TDOE, learner-assisted technology approved by TDOE, instructional materials approved by TDOE, and so forth. Several other details I'll be glad to discuss. If anybody has any questions on these, I know some have already looked at this bill and know what it does. And I'll be glad to answer questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any comments, questions? Representative Sapicki.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked this question in subcommittee to get more clarification on the eligible education expenses. Everything I agree with on there, but you got D in here, child care services. Is that in there because it's required by the ESSER funds?
I believe it is. That is one of the categories they include, and the services will be bound by Department of Education rules and standards for child care programs that are educationally based. So it's not just a babysitter or some kind of child care only.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, thank you for bringing this legislation as we all talk about learning loss and opportunities for parents to really get their children back up to speed where they should be. I think this is going to be a great tool that we can use to get students back there. So thank you for bringing this.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, and I was going through here as to what these funds may be used for, and it looks like there's private entities who could receive these public funds, and it looks like the department pretty much has the sole discretion as to who can qualify as a provider, and I get nervous every time this Department of Education makes decisions about third-party contracts or where we're sending our public tax dollars. So I just want to make sure, what is a supplemental educational service of the type contemplated by this act who could receive these public funds?
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're talking about supplemental materials?
Well, subsection F and subsection 3 there talks about supplemental education services, and I just was curious what that means.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see, there's several things here. The instructional materials all have to be approved by TDOE. Educational therapy service must meet the requirements established by TDOE and the State Board of Education. Let's see, learner assisted technology. This would be defined, that particular item is defined as a piece of equipment or system that helps bypass, work around, or compensate for an individual's specific learning deficit. So they're very, very, very specific in where these funds can be spent and on exactly what. There may be some reading guides, text-to-speech software, frequency modulation systems that can reduce background noise in the classroom and amplify what the teacher says, and et cetera. Things like that is what I'm understanding.
You follow up any? Yes, sir. You recognize Representative Clemens.
Thank you, and I appreciate that explanation. And then the other part here says that in subsection capital G says other education expenses as approved by the department. Is there any limit on the scope of education expenses that the department could approve for use of these taxpayer funds or public funds?
Recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I think the federal guidelines that have come down with this are going to be pretty stringent that the department has to comply with. This has been done already in about 4 or 5 other states that I know of. And so there's a framework already there that's being addressed. I don't have all of the details of that program to know exactly what all I could say that's included, but I know there's some pretty strict guidelines that came down from the federal government for these grants, and they're going to have to follow those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Spencer.
You're welcome. Anyone else want to speak on House Bill 2774? Any objection? Okay, the question's been called. Any objection to the question? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving 2774 out to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Moves out. Item number 9 by Chairman Ramsey. You're recognized. Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. This is a bill, I do have an amendment on it, I think that's been filed 165053, which does not make the amendment, or does not make the bill.
You got a motion and a second on your amendment 16053. All it says is just adding, it's giving the name to the legislation, Heart to Heart Act. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, members, that's the amendment. Any objection to adding it? Representative Clemens?
I just had a question. Are we going to name bills after 80s sitcoms? You remember that Heart to Heart?
I should be
Am I the only
the,
one that remembers that? Okay,
yeah,
never mind.
Was it 1,000 comedians out of work? Representative Ramsey?
I should be the expert on ancient TV shows. Thank you, sir.
Okay, back to business. 16053. Any objection to adding it to House Bill 2530? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding to the amendment indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, your bill has been named in 2530. Go ahead and tell us what you're doing.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2009, a 12-year-old son of one of my constituents, his name was Tanner Lee Jameson, his mom's name, Rhonda Harrell. He passed away in his basketball practice in one of the schools with sudden cardiac arrest. We began at that time seeking requirements for AED devices in school, the automated external defibrillators. The initial bill was called the Tanner Lee Jameson Act and was amended each year until 2 years ago, Governor Lee agreed to fund the last 8 high schools for an AED device. And you'll be glad to know that Tennessee was the first state to do that. Having seen fatal events on school buses, we began to assess the presence of basic life support, including AED usage on school bus operators in Tennessee and other states. And of the 3 LEAs in my district, 2 of them do require that basic life support. One requires it only for special education and school time hours. So this bill has no fiscal note because schools already require teachers to take basic life support training, which is being offered in school systems. It was a requirement of the Tanner Lee Jameson Act several years ago. The drivers would merely need to attend at no charge. The act of naming this bill Heart to Heart is in honor of Tanner Lee Jameson and his mother, Rhonda Harrell. So pending any questions, sir, I will renew my motion.
Thank you. Great bill. In my opinion, any members, any discussion? Representative Carriage?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, sponsor, for bringing this. I spoke just a little bit on K through 12 sub. I was honored to be able to meet Rhonda. And I also have a very, very good friend who a defibrillator saved her son's life, who was playing freshman baseball at my alma mater, or basketball, I'm sorry, my alma mater there at Central High School in Knox County, and had no health issues and had cardiac arrest. And thank goodness some of the kids knew where there was a defibrillator in the office at the time. and it gives me chills every time I talk about it. The office is normally closed after school by 4:30, and this happened a little after that. But that day, the office door was left open, and this student who was playing basketball, who worked in the office during his free time, knew where that defibrillator was. So I'm a huge supporter of this, and I would encourage anybody that deals with any age to always try to have a defibrillator if possible. So thank you for bringing this. Defibrillator saves lives. So thank you for it.
Thank you. Anyone else? House Bill 2530. Here, no objection. All those in favor of moving 2530 out to county rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, ladies and
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much. Members, if it would be okay, we're going to have to lose some of our members early, and I've got a bill. I've got some guests here to speak on it. I would like to, without objection, jump over to House Bill. You didn't even hear what, House Bill 2430, and I'm going to turn the gavel over to Chairman Hicks. Oh, I'm sorry. Chairman Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, members, next on the agenda is House Bill 2430 by Chairman White. Do I have a motion and a second? Properly motioned and seconded. Chairman White, do we have any amendments on this bill?
We do. The amendment is it 15406?
Yes, sir. That's what we're showing. Properly motioned and seconded. Mr. Chair, or Chairman White, does this rewrite the bill?
It does.
Okay, members, if it's okay, we'll go ahead and get the amendment put on before we move forward. Properly motioned and seconded. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Amendment goes on the bill. Mr. Chairman, you are recognized on the bill as amended.
Thank you very much. And members, thank you very much for letting me present this to you. We don't want to take a lot of time on this and see if I can explain this. I do have a couple of speakers that want to speak in favor or against. I got Mayor Palazzolo here from the city of Germantown. He wants to speak on it, as well as Tony Thompson with the Shelby County Schools. Briefly, and I'll give you as much history as you want. The reason I'm bringing this as the state representative for this area, Shelby County Schools and Germantown, I am trying to bring to rest a subject that's been out there for 8-9 years now, and they cannot solve it locally. And so they've asked me to help bring this before y'all to see if we cannot get this off of our table. And what it deals with, before 2010, Shelby County had 2 school districts, and you have 6-7 cities in Shelby County. Before 2010, you had the Memphis City Schools and you had the Shelby County Schools. Now, the Memphis City Schools were in all the geographic boundary of the city of Memphis. And the Shelby County Schools were everything outside that, and they represent the communities of Millington on the north, and Bartlett, and Lakeland, and Arlington, and Collierville, and Germantown. And then in 2010, approximately, the city of Memphis gave up their school charter. City of Memphis no longer funds, I think it was about 60-70 million they put into the schools. They got out of the school business altogether, and they gave their charter. So what happened, we only had one other district, so the city schools went into the Shelby County school system. So now we had 150,000 students for the entire county. Well, back during 2013, when Senator Norris and others were here, a lot of people felt like the 150,000 school system was very large. And so the municipalities, the 6 municipalities outside of the city of Memphis, Germantown, Collierville, Lakeland, Arlington, Bartlett, and Millington, asked if they could have their own school systems. So we passed a law in 2013 giving these 6 municipalities their own school system. And that's what happened. And so they all started, and they're all doing very well. In Germantown that I represent, besides the city of Memphis, they have some of the highest ACT scores in the state. and they're doing very, very well. But what happened during that time in 2013, when all the districts took off, the Shelby County Schools requested that they keep 3 facilities, 3 school buildings within Shelby County Schools, and they didn't go into the Germantown Municipal Schools. But these 3 schools are in the geographic boundaries of the city of Germantown. What kind of hurt, and at the time, there's a long story there. These were called Germantown Elementary, Germantown Middle, and Germantown High School. They're the 3 namesake schools of the city of Germantown at that time. Even though they were part originally of Shelby County Schools before 2010 and 2013, the citizens and the students of Germantown went to these schools. They were their community schools. Well, they basically lost those when Shelby County decided to keep those 3 schools. We call it the 3 Gs or the 3 legacy schools. Well, that was then. This is now. We're 9 years later. And I ran a bill last year, and I pulled it at the end of the year. And I says, you guys, the city of Germantown and Shelby County Schools, would you come together and find a solution, a mutual agreement? So we met 13 times in March, in summer and fall, all the way to the first week of January, 13 negotiations, and everything was very agreeable. We would protect the students that go there, let them matriculate out. And all, of course, like most things, it comes down to a thing of money. How much is a property worth? These buildings were built back in the 70s, and the high school was built back in 59 to 65. It's a campus, so several buildings were being built. These are 45, 50, 55-year-old buildings. They've been paid for, and they really need, going forward someday, they need to be replaced. So Germantown is asked to be able to, what I'm standing here before you, the city of Germantown is asking, let us take these buildings and put them back under the management of the Germantown Municipal Schools or the city of Germantown, because they are in our geographic boundaries. We'll protect the students. We just want to manage the schools because they are in our district, our LEA. And I think that's a fair request, but it's come down to a thing of money. But in the bill, it says that the city of Germantown would purchase them for the value of the land which they sit on, or any bonded debt that may still be out there. So they made that offer, and so that's kind of where we are. So bringing the bill so we can kind of finally decide this one way or the other for the city of Germantown. Now, Mr. Chairman, I have 2 people have asked to speak on this. And so whenever the committee's ready, I'd like to recognize them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that explanation. I believe Leader Gant wants to say a few words next. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman and committee, and I'm going to be very brief. This is a very common sense approach. It's not very complicated. These schools are inside the city of Germantown, and that's where they need to be, is in that Germantown school system. And as Chairman mentioned, the municipal LEA would be required to pay the county LEA for the fair market value of the land used in the school operations, plus any outstanding debt on those improvements. So it's a very common sense approach. It's not very difficult to understand the reasoning of why this legislation is being brought. So I would encourage you to support and vote in favor of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Leader Gant. Representative Parkinson, before we have the guest, okay. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Chairman White. Chairman White, you mentioned they asked you to bring this bill. Who is they?
I met with them 13 times during the fall and summer, and actually both parties have. As you know, this can be a delicate subject when you get into talking about issues like this, but both parties on both sides of the aisle, the Shelby County School, those who were in negotiation meetings were a representative of the school board and a representative of the senior staff, and then we had the city of Germantown there and myself. And so when it came down to the end this past January, I said, is there any way y'all can work this out where I don't have to stand up in front of the committee and carry this bill? And they both said, you need to carry the bill so we can get this off of our plate. And I am carrying it on behalf of both. I believe that it's a fair ask to go ahead and transfer these schools back to the city of Germantown because they want to manage these schools. They want to be the ones who upkeep the property. And there's a lot of deferred maintenance on these buildings. They want to maintain the property. They want to make sure that the schools are up to the standards that they want to take care of in their community.
Representative Parkinson, you recognize for follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just need to be clear so I can get it on the record. Are you telling me that that Superintendent Joris Ray asked you to bring a bill that would ultimately, if they don't come to an agreement, would take the property from Shelby County Schools and give it to Germantown? You telling me that Superintendent Ray told you to bring this bill?
I'm not going to mention any names. I'm telling you that in the meetings that I were in, both sides asked me to move forward with this bill.
One more follow-up, Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chairman White, I'm just trying to get a clear answer. And so if not Superintendent Joris Ray, and maybe when Tony Thompson comes up here, he can answer that question, or maybe Dr. Ray can send me a text because I know he's watching this. But I just have a hard time, and I'm not questioning your integrity, but I just have a hard time fathoming the superintendent of Shelby County Schools telling you to bring a bill that would ultimately snatch property that is owned by Shelby County Schools and give it to another municipality. And in reality, Germantown sits inside of Shelby County, not Shelby County sitting inside of Germantown. Geographically, if we're going to go there, and this bill, the bill that separated these schools was in 2000, I think 13 you mentioned, and these buildings were owned and operated at the time by Shelby County Schools, and in which should have been an automatic grandfather for that situation until Shelby County Schools decided to what they wanted to do with their schools. But you are literally under this legislation putting both Germantown and Shelby County Schools, all Germantown has to do is say, I don't agree, I don't agree, I don't agree. And then they get the buildings for free, or they get the buildings handed over to them. Maybe not for free, but they get the buildings handed over to them. Is that not correct?
Chairman White.
Thank you. Number one, you just made my point. These were Shelby County school buildings. They have been paid for by the taxpayers of all of Shelby County for the past 50 years, including the citizens of Germantown.
Right. And thank you. Yeah, and Chairman White, thank you for that. But Germantown chose to separate themselves away from Shelby County Schools. Shelby County Schools didn't choose to separate themselves away from Germantown. It was vice versa. That choice comes with consequences. And if they chose to set up their own, which I'm fine with that, I'm perfectly okay with that, with them setting up their own school district, then they walked away from Shelby County, not Shelby County walking away from them. Those buildings belonged to Shelby County, and when Germantown was part of it, they were part of it, but they chose to leave.
Okay, I'm not going to debate that with you, but all the students in Shelby County are Shelby County public school students.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I'd ask that you wait until you're recognized for responses moving forward. Without any objections, we have nobody else on the list right now. So without any objections, we've got some guests here to speak. We'll go out of session. The guests we have on the list, if they would come up, the first two, our left, your right, would be Mr. John Ferris and Mayor Mike Palazzolo here. And then our right, your left, also on the list is Mr. Tony Thompson. And we'll start our left with, please state your name and who you're with for the record, please. I'm sorry, you have 3 minutes. Each of you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Mr. Chairman, are you calling on me first?
Yes, sir. Just
Thank
whichever
you.
one y'all want to go first. You're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Germantown Mayor Mike Palazzolo. Today I represent all of our residents, 41,333 residents, and our families with school-aged children. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for being recognized today. I want to thank Chairman White for bringing forward this important and appropriate legislation. As mentioned earlier, at the conclusion of the last session, the Assembly asked that we make an effort to resolve the LEA question at the local level. And I want to thank the chairman for facilitating those 13 meetings between Shelby County Schools and the city of Germantown. Regrettably, a solution could not be obtained during that time. But first, let me state just very quickly, this bill does fit the classic definitions associated with good legislation. It is important to remember this bill makes it legal, and I repeat, legal, to operate an LEA and another LEA's jurisdictional boundaries with mutual and contractual agreement. This bill offers a prescriptive solution, remedy, and course of action involving fair consideration of market value for a property and a student transition plan. And it does not disrupt students, faculty, or families as they have an opportunity to grade out and graduate from their current schools. This bill codifies a 2017 opinion from the State Attorney General, which stated it is illegal to operate a public charter school or traditional public school in another LEA's jurisdiction. Let me remind you today that Shelby County Schools requested this Attorney General opinion in 2017. Without this request from Shelby County Schools, we're not here today. Today, you are simply asked to make this activity legal. Without this bill, there's nothing stopping or permitting Shelby County Schools to construct, purchase, or acquire or operate a school in each of your home cities or districts. Again, codifying the AG opinion of 2017 makes it legal with mutual consent. As an aside to this issue, the residents of Germantown have no ability, nor are we allowed to vote or elect representation on the Shelby County School Board. We pay Shelby County taxes, and yet we have no vote or ability for our families to be properly heard and represented at the school board level. In closing, this bill is fair, equitable, and a just resolution to a lingering and unsustainable issue. With your adoption and support, a legal LEA can be created. Further, I commit to using this property for educational purposes for Germantown's long-term school growth needs, and I pledge to reach a mutually agreed upon long-term transition plan for our students at SCS, their families, and faculty. Thank you for your support and passage of this very important bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Also on the list, we have Mr. John Ferris. Would you like to say anything, Mr. Ferris?
I'm gonna pass right now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions for these two at this point, for our two guests? Okay, you're recognized, Representative Parkinson.
Starting to wonder if I'm the only one in this debate, Mr. Chair. But thank you, Mayor. Good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome. Mayor, when is there any harm being done with Shelby County operating these schools inside of Germantown?
Mr. Chairman.
Palazzolo.
Thank you. The schools are now currently operated by SCS, and it's our intent for them to continue to operate, and hopefully we'll be able for all those students to grade out of their schools. We need the campuses and the property and the facilities for our future long-term growth. Those schools are operated currently in our city boundaries, and yes, they're operated well.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, in all due respect, I was asking, is there any harm being done because Shelby County schools are operating inside of Germantown?
Mr. Palazzolo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see harm. This is not the question at hand. The question at hand is operating one LEA in another LEA's jurisdiction legally.
Representative Parkinson, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Mayor, the what is the expected growth for students in Germantown? What's the expected outcome? Because you guys just had a study done, did you not?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, yes, we had a demographer work some long-term planning, and we show stability for the first 10 years or the next 10 years. Thereafter, we look in 15 to 20-year planning model. We have approximately 1,000 residential single-family homes that have been approved or in the pipeline. We see long-term growth. My city is noted for not 0-year planning, but long-term planning. And so we're planning for the future. Hence our proposal to have a long-term transition to protect the students, faculty, and parents at our heritage schools in Germantown.
President Parkinson, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mayor, for your answers. But in that study, didn't that study show that there was no expected large amount of growth in Germantown from that study? Didn't it? I don't know if I need to pull it up, but isn't that what you got from that?
Mr. Palazzolo?
Thank you, Chairman. As stated, I just stated a moment ago, the stability remains pretty constant for 10 years, and that's the length of that demographer's study. We're looking at 15 and 20-year growth patterns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir. Thank
All
you,
right,
Mr. Mayor.
next on the list, we have Representative Love. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mayor, thank you for your presence here today. Your testimony is that you are committed to using these buildings for educational purposes, correct?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Palazzolo?
Thank you. Yeah, that is correct, sir.
And you have a plan for the current students who are enrolled in the school, correct?
Thank you, Chairman. Those schools are operated by Shelby County Schools, and we would hope that they would be maintained and operated by Shelby County Schools with a long-term, agreeable, mutually agreeable transition plan.
Representative Love, follow up.
All right. You mentioned the AG opinion that was requested by Shelby County Schools, right?
Correct, sir.
Do you recall the reason for that AG opinion request?
I'll turn that over to Mr. Ferris.
Let me
Mr.
answer
Ferris.
that if I can, Chairman. Thank you. The state statute, the only authority Shelby County has to operate the schools is through the General Assembly, the statutes. The statutes do not authorize one LEA to operate outside its boundaries. Currently, Shelby County Schools are operating outside their boundaries. If you go to their website, it doesn't even show Germantown on the boundaries, within their boundaries. So it's not just this AG's opinion, it's the state statute. And so they do not have the authority through the legislature to be where they are. Boundaries change all the time. Germantown's boundaries have changed. And so Shelby County's boundaries have changed too, as far as the school district is concerned. So it's not just that AG's opinion.
Representative Love, follow up.
Well, so I'll ask the question again. Do you know the reason why Shelby County originally requested that AG opinion?
Mr. Ferris? Oh, Mr. Palazzolo?
That would be a question for Shelby County Schools, but the answer was that a charter, public charter, or traditional public school cannot operate in another LEA's jurisdiction, plain and simple.
And the only reason, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Representative Love?
And the only reason I'm asking is I remember testimony from the subcommittee that maybe a word or two was left out of that opinion, and that maybe some thought that the original request was about other schools operating in Shelby County. But I'll defer, and maybe our next guest can shed some light on. But I have concerns, as I expressed in subcommittee, about what's happening or will happen to the African American students who are currently enrolled in these 3 school buildings when they will then have no school building to be educated in unless Shelby County finds some way to absorb them into their school buildings, which I've been told may be more difficult. But that's my concern about that situation, because I don't want to see some students displaced because there may be a desire today to provide education, and then 10 years from now, maybe the building's used for something else or sold, and some other development is built there. That's my concern.
Mr.
Mayor?
Chairman, if I may, thank you, Mr.
Recognized.
Chairman. And very good question, Representative Love. Thank you. The Reimagine 901 plan, which is the long-term strategic plan for Memphis Shelby County Schools, it points in their presentation deck the Germantown issue and whether that will be something that's sustainable. Your question is very valid. In today's current enrollment numbers, just a short 4 miles away and up to 5 miles away, there are 3 local high schools that have 2,287 empty seats that could be handled and absorb the current capacity. But the current capacity is not an issue, Representative. It's the long term. And we're looking for a long-term transition plan, 13 or so years. The Reimagine 901 plan calls for closing schools, making them more efficient, and going back to the neighborhood school approach. Germantown Elementary, Middle, and High School are not neighborhood schools. Those are schools that students currently go past not empty, but schools with vacancy, and they pass those in multiple attendance zones. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Love, one more.
Is there no other land in Germantown upon which you can build 3 schools?
Mayor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're a landlocked community. We're close to being built out. Public schools are held in trust for the taxpayers and the residents of a region. That's substantiated in Prescott versus Lennox, a case that went to the Supreme Court, and it is good case law. So those buildings are held in trust. We all represent our constituents. We don't want to waste tax money. That would be not good planning to build a school on vacant property next to a school. And so we lack schools in our southwest quadrant of our city where these schools sit currently. So we'd like to make really good use of that public land for our residents and for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, sir. Next on the list, we have Representative Clemens. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just real quick, before I get to my question that I did have, you said there was 2,287 spots vacant, but the testimony last week in the sub said there were 3,300 students. Is that correct?
Thank you,
Mayor,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yes, there are 3 schools, Germantown Elementary, Germantown Middle, Germantown High School. They total 3,393 students as of data from 2022. It has been represented to us and Chairman White in our 13 meetings that Shelby County Schools can currently today fully absorb, and this is from their leadership and their elected leadership, that they can fully absorb Germantown Elementary and Germantown Middle School today. The schools that have vacancy are Ridgeway, Southwind, and Kirby. And again, those are in close proximity. I can give you those exact numbers. They're all a matter of public record in the public domain. And those are the high schools that I make mention of, Ridgeway, Southwind, and Kirby. Those are the 2,287 seats that can handle the 2,017 students at Germantown High School.
Representative Clemens, follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so last week, we also discussed this federal court settlement agreement. So I haven't seen the federal court settlement agreement, but it's my understanding that both sides in this dispute mutually entered into that agreement, and it's still in effect, and that governs this situation. I just want to get clarification from you or Mr. Ferris if that's accurate and what the status of that is, or if I have any misunderstanding of that document.
Both sides.
Mr. Ferris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. Both sides are in compliance with that agreement. That agreement does not deal with these 3 schools. Nowhere in that agreement are these 3 schools mentioned. They're not part of the agreement. So, it's really we believe it's a red herring. The whole situation is governed by state law, which does not permit an LEA to operate outside its boundaries, which is what's going on, what has been going on. So, that agreement is in effect. Germantown is performing under that agreement, Representative Clemens, and will continue to do that. But that agreement does not touch these 3 schools. There's nowhere in the agreement is it mentioned.
Representative Clemens, follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so it's your position that that settlement agreement in federal court concerns this situation in no way whatsoever.
Mr. Ferris.
That's
recognized.
correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And on the list, we also have Representative Parkinson. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, again. I want to circle back on the expected growth from of Germantown. You all hired an individual named McKibben. McKibben, he presented updated numbers to Germantown Municipal Schools District of Education in January, as a matter of fact, and enrollment is expected to remain fairly steady. In 2031, he expects about 5,986 students in Germantown schools. That's fewer than 100 more than is currently in the system today. Let me say that part again. In 2031, this is the person that you hired to do this study. In 2031, he expects about 5,986 students in Germantown schools. That's fewer than 100 more than are currently in the school system today. Minimal change is expected at the elementary level. The biggest increase is at the middle school of fewer than 150 students. But at the high school, population is expected to decrease by an estimated 64 students. At the high school, population is expected to decrease by an estimated 64. Currently, Germantown has more children between the ages of 5 and 9 than it does from newborns to age 4. As children get older, there will be a decrease in children enrolling in Germantown's elementary schools. Births have declined in Germantown, a trend McKibben expects to continue. McKibben is who you hired. Is not due to a change in birth rate, but related to the number of women at childbearing age in the suburb. Very few people in their 20s are moving to Germantown, he said. Empty nesters aren't leaving the suburb, and those ages 50 to 60 are not enrolling children in the school district. He called this the statistic, the curse of the successful school district. Students graduate, have successful careers elsewhere, but their parents stay here in Germantown. That doesn't sound like expected growth, Mr. Mayor. Then that's the person that you hired.
Mayor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I stated earlier, we're looking for 15 to 20 years from now, long-term strategic growth. We have 1,000 approved in the pipeline, single-family residential units. So our city will grow and probably approach close to build-out by that time. So there's not an immediate need. There will be a long-term need. That study takes us through the remaining 9 years, as you mentioned, or 9 additional years from today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, members. Thank you, guests, for being here. We appreciate your input. Chairman White, you had a question?
I would just go say, if we go ahead and let Mr. Thompson speak, I know some of our members got to leave, and I'd like to, let's go ahead and take a vote before they have to leave. So let's recognize Mr. Thompson.
Yes, sir. Mr. Thompson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is my mic on?
Yes,
Can you hear me? I'm here today on behalf of Shelby County Schools, and in particular, I'm here on behalf of over 3,300 students that attend these 3 schools in Germantown, 250 teachers and faculty members and their families. I guess we're going to have to relive a little bit of what we dealt with in the subcommittee, but and I have the utmost respect for Chairman White and for Leader Gant, but it's not a simple matter, Leader, and it's a very complicated matter and a complex matter. And the main thing it is a local matter. And they have asked for you to come up here. They've come up here to ask you to settle a local matter. But let me be clear about who brought this legislation. The city of Germantown brought this legislation. And if there were any conversations from anyone on my side, by my client or anyone representing my client about the wanting to bring this legislation, I can tell you this, that we never saw an amendment before it appeared. We never had any input in any amendment. And we don't agree with any amendment we've seen about 4 versions I've seen. This is the latest. So just to be clear, we do not support this bill. Chairman White told a little bit of the story, and I want to pick up during part of the story where the 6 municipalities wanted to create their own school systems. He left out a very important point. It was alluded to here. But Shelby County, not Shelby County Schools, but Shelby County sued those 6 municipalities, and it basically halted the creation of those 6 LEAs. And they sued them based on constitutional grounds. I won't get into the details of the lawsuit, but it was well-founded, and it was in U.S. District Court, a federal court lawsuit. After that happened, the parties began to talk. And my client talked with each municipality one by one and tried to settle the case. And the question was, will you all educate the children that attend these schools within your jurisdictional boundaries? And every single one, Lakeland, Arlington, Bartlett, Collierville, all agreed to educate the kids in the schools that were in those zones. Millington had one school close to the city limits of Millington whose zone swept out into the county, and they said to us, you all keep that school. So we now own and operate a school in Millington. And to imply, it's just bad faith, to imply that we need this bill for us to legally operate is just wrong, and it's bad faith. We as Shelby County Schools were there before any of the municipalities were there. Our schools, the 3 in question, were built in 1964, 1975, and 1979. The Germantown LEA was allowed to be created because of the settlement of the lawsuit around these schools. And our question to Germantown was, will you educate the kids that go to all these schools? 8 schools in Germantown.
Mr. Thompson, your 3 minutes are up, so wind it up. You can finish up for your last few comments.
Well, the answer was no. And so the settlement agreement, which is right here and is active, it doesn't refer to the 3 schools because it refers to the 5. We owned all 8. We gave them 5 schools, and they own and operate 5 schools. They don't need, it's been mentioned, and I'm happy to answer questions since I'm out of time, but there has been a study. They expect their attendance to decrease. This is about the land for them. It's about the kids for us. It's about making sure that these kids get an education and are not disrupted in that education. And the bottom line, and I'll close with this, the bottom line is right. We think we can absorb the middle school and the elementary school students. We need a new high school if we were to give up these 3 schools. New high school costs about $80 million.
Thank you, sir.
The properties are valued at about $30 million, and therein lies the problem. Since we won't sell the properties for $30 million, they're asking you to force us to enter an agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for your comments. We have a couple of people on the list here with a few questions. Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to get back to that federal court agreement. So you heard me ask the other gentleman about that federal court settlement agreement. Is it your opinion and your client's opinion that that does govern this matter in some way?
Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my opinion that it does govern this matter, that any disputes arising from this matter that was settled are supposed to be taken up at the courthouse, not at the state legislature. And I believe that there is an argument to be made that they're in violation of the agreement by pursuing this legislation. But yes, it absolutely governs the situation here, and in my opinion, it's going to reopen that entire lawsuit.
Representative Clemens, follow up.
Who are the parties to that lawsuit that entered into that settlement agreement? And if it's valid and in effect, then it was mutually entered into. So who entered into that?
This agreement, I'll read from it, the Agreement of Settlement and Compromise. This agreement is entered into by the Board of Commissioners of Shelby County, the County Commission, Shelby County, Tennessee, the county, the Shelby County Board of Education, the County Board of Education, my client, the City of Germantown, Mayor Palazzolo, who was on the board of mayor and aldermen at the time this was entered into and voted to affirm this agreement. The City of Germantown, Tennessee, the Germantown Board of Education, the Germantown Board. So all those parties, all individually, their bodies, the school boards, the county commission, city councils, they all voted to approve the agreement. That agreement was taken to the court, and the court settled the lawsuit and dismissed the case. And that allowed the Germantown LEA to be formed and created to complete the process to begin operation. And as a part of this agreement, we deeded them 5 of the 8 schools.
Reverend Clemens, follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, that, like I said in the subcommittee, if that settlement agreement is controlling here and overlaps with the subject matter of this legislation anyway, then it's, I assume that y'all are most definitely going to file this and take this up in federal court again. And I assume if you do that, my colleagues over here, the people they represent are going to be paying for that lawsuit as well as the people you represent. And so I have a feeling people are going to incur more costs if we go to litigation, if your opinion on that settlement agreement is in fact accurate. So that concerns me greatly. And I would just, I don't know, I haven't seen the settlement agreement, but I would caution my colleagues, if there is a federal settlement agreement and we're using legislation to somehow circumvent that, even though both parties entered into it, you just don't get to come up and change legislation because you have buyer's remorse about a settlement agreement you entered into. If that's the case, I would caution this committee. Also, one last question, Mr. Thompson. I'd asked questions about the schools and I think my colleague Representative Love asked this question too about where these students would go. And it's my understanding that these are optional schools, that the parents can send their children to these schools outside the district from which they're zoned. And the ones that were mentioned earlier are not optional schools. So are those students actually able to go to those schools that he referenced? Or because they're not optional schools and Germantown ones are? Or do you know anything about that?
I'm not
You
sure.
recognize-
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I understand exactly where you're going, but I'll try to answer it this way. Germantown High School is an optional school. It's a Shelby County owned and operated school, and it's an optional school. And they offer programs there that are not offered at other high schools. And kids in Shelby County choose to go to that school. We're all about school choice and giving parental options. And these children in the largest district in the state that has its own set of challenges, I'll say, choose to go. Some of these students are actually zoned to attend this school, but most of these students choose to go there. And I would think and hope that the legislature would want to lift up these kids and help them achieve what they're trying to achieve without disrupting their lives and their education. And let this be settled at the local matter, not try to take their schools away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next on the list, we have Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question to Germantown, in the bill, you are going to allow the students in that K through 12 system in Germantown to finish in those schools. Is that correct?
Mr. Representative, my commitment to that is yes.
Okay.
Chairman Sapicki.
And then you, as those students matriculate through, you will backfill them with students, I assume based off of growth from Germantown, because there are children going to that school that aren't in Germantown right now. That how are you going to fill them when the kindergartners move to first grade? Where are those kindergartners going to come from?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. We want, and part of the language of this bill written by Chairman White is to allow for both LEAs to reach a mutual agreement, and they have time as well, since this does not go into effect until July of 2023. So hopefully the parties will come together and arrange for a transition plan, and that will be at the responsibility of Shelby County Schools. We want to make sure all those kids are educated and their siblings, the faculty, staff, all the folks associated with those schools, families are not disrupted. So we would be agreeable to, virtually talking about any type of transition plan, what's best for those students and their families.
Chairman Speaker, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman Hurt. And then, Mr. Thompson, you are representing who here?
I represent Shelby County Schools, the largest school system in the state.
You recognize.
And not that you can't do a great job. If this is so important to Shelby County Schools, why aren't they here? Why aren't they here? I mean, with all due respect to you, you do a great job. But if this is so important that you guys been fighting about this for so long, why wouldn't Germantown took the time to come to the General Assembly and present their case. Why wouldn't the people from Shelby County come here and present their case to us? I'm just curious.
You recognize.
I advised them not to come. And the reason I did is, wasn't mentioned earlier, but we defeated this bill in the Senate last year. You guys have never had this before you. It was dead in the Senate last year. And it's a complicated issue. They're trying to run the largest school system in the state. And I advised them not to come, quite frankly, because to be honest, I don't think it will make any difference on what this body does. That's my personal feeling and opinion about that. I think that once you all have the information, you're going to make your decision.
Chairman speaking.
And I appreciate that very much. The problem I'm wrestling with is Chairman White and these gentlemen, I'm assuming were in these meetings these 13 meetings. Shelby County was there at those meetings, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
We could be getting firsthand information from Shelby County Schools on their view of what those 13 meetings represented based off of their attendance in those meetings and what they said verbatim. And so now I have testimony from people that were there. I don't have the testimony from the other members who were there. And I wish we could have that information and then be able to sit here and try to figure this out. But I feel kind of slighted here that they chose not to come to speak to us.
Okay.
So that's all, Mr. Chairman. That's all I got. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, response.
Thank you. I'm surprised, quite frankly, that they met 13 times. I mean, there was a good faith effort and they talked about a lot of different things, but I can sum it up. I've already summed it up. We need a high school. We need replacement costs for the high school. We have 3 properties worth about $30 million. We need about $80 million. We don't need the $110 million that they built in Collierville down the street. We just need $80 million. If we were offered, and I don't have the authority to do this, and I'm sure we're not going to settle this thing today, but if we were offered enough money to build a high school and some time, a few years to have it built and transition those children into the other schools and the new school, we wouldn't be here. But it's, the amendment is going to force us. Number one, it's unconstitutional in the sense that it impairs our contract, but the amendment forces us to take a choice, 2 bad choices. One choice is we can enter an agreement for up to 12 years or 13 years to continue to teach the kids. And at the end of that 13 years, or if we don't enter into an agreement, the other bad choice, either way, our property goes to them for what's then fair market value for the land only, So what that does is puts our high school kids out on the street without a place to go and not enough resources in our pocket to replace the building. And don't let the language, if you've had a chance to look at the language, it says that it must be used for educational purposes. There is a sentence that says that. The sentence immediately following that says, but if the city or the school system in Germantown decides there's a better community interest, they can sell it. They could sell the property on day 2, should this become law.
You good, Chair? Back in session. Members, we're back in session. We've had multiple times to ask questions. Everybody's been recognized. Thank you for coming to speak. Okay.
Mr. Chair, in all due respect, we never got to ask our representative of Shelby County Schools one single question. In all due respect, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion. I'm checking. Give me just a second. I'm checking parliamentary procedure here. Okay, members, since we have objections, we'll take a vote to go back in session. We see objections. One question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, you have the authority to let us just go back into session so we can fairly, you've been running this committee very fairly, I think. And we just want to ask questions of the individual in recess. And you have the authority to put us back in recess without us going through a vote. And you've been running it fairly, and I ask that you just please continue to run it fairly like you've been, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. I'm going to we've got to wind this up. We've had a lot of discussion. We need to get to a vote and get this moving. I will allow 2 questions from the 2. I think you 2 had objections. Let's get to the question quickly, and then let's let Mr. Thompson answer since y'all have not asked him, and then let's move forward. Thank you. Oh, back out of session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go to the question I asked earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chair. What was the original reason for that AG opinion that was asked?
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a couple of more minutes. The Attorney General's opinion was requested in 2017 because a charter school came to Shelby County Schools and applied to open. And as the authorizer of charter schools, we approved a charter school to be open. That charter school then went out into another municipality. I can't remember which one it was, but it could have been Germantown, Collierville, any of them. It wouldn't have mattered. And at that point, that LEA, that municipality said, hold on, wait a minute. We don't think you could do this. They requested the opinion, and it's been waved around like it's the gospel. But I'll tell you, there's one important word that's been left out of the opinion. The Attorney General said, no, you do not have the authority to open and operate in another LEA. One LEA cannot go and open and operate. It's distinguishable here because, as I said, our schools were operating since 1965. And the other LEA didn't even exist until 2014. And again, that was a part of the settlement agreement that allowed them to go forward.
Thanks, sir. Representative Love, follow up?
No, sir. That's all I want to hear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Representative Parkinson, you are recognized.
Mr. Chair, please make sure you know that I truly appreciate you being fair in this hearing. Mr. Thompson, and 2 things. One, I got a text message from the board chair, Michelle McKissick, saying that she did not ask for this bill to be brought. And I got a text from the superintendent that he did not ask for this bill to be brought. Do you know who asked for this bill to be brought to Chairman White?
Mr. Thompson?
No, I don't. But I will say this in Chairman White's defense, if you will. This bill was filed last year. Last year, the bill attempted to take our property without any compensation. It was defeated in the Senate. And at that time, everybody knew that this was coming back before you. We all knew that there was a bill that was going to be coming back. They tried to work it out. They met 13 times. They weren't able to work it out. Again, we'll sell them $30 million worth of property for $80 million, but I'm sure they don't want to pay it, so they want to take it through this bill. But the truth is that we never saw an amendment before it was filed or made public. We never had any input in any amendment. And so it's not our bill. We don't have anything to do with this bill. And if you notice, the elephant that's not in the room is Germantown LEA. In almost 10 years since we've been doing this under this agreement, not once has the superintendent or a school board member from the Germantown LEA come to us and said, we need these properties. Not one time. This is the mayor. This is the mayor of Germantown that wants the land for fair market value. And to us, the land is priceless. And I would ask you to vote against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm trying
Chairman
to get,
Barson, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm trying to get a better understanding of. Have you ever seen where? I've been here for 12 years now. 12 plus years now, and I don't think I've ever seen us pass a bill that will be retroactive to go back years back and scoop something up. And in essence, what I'm asking is, based on this legislation, based on the legislation that created the municipal schools, when that legislation, when everything was ironed out, there were schools inside of Shelby County schools had schools really inside of Shelby County. Germantown sits inside of Shelby County. But if it said that these schools are inside of Germantown, LEA, okay. But when everything was ironed out based on the legislation, Norris Todd 2, if I'm not mistaken, those school buildings and schools were still inside of Germantown proper. And so when that legislation was passed, it did
Is there
not.
a question?
Yes, sir. I'm getting to it.
Barson, let's
I'm
get
just
to
trying to. I'm trying to lay out the preface for
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, and so there was no legislation that would remove the Shelby County schools students from Germantown, and now we're bringing legislation that would force them out in a retroactive manner based on the law that was passed years ago. Am I off base with that, or help me out?
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way that I would describe it is there were two words mentioned earlier, and that's buyer's remorse. At the time this all was unfolding, they had an opportunity to take all 8 schools and educate all the children in all 8 schools. They did not agree to educate the kids in these 3 schools in perpetuity. And that was our main concern. And that's why we still have the 3 schools. And that's why the agreement encompasses 5 schools, the 5 remaining schools.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Reverend Castman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we go back into session.
Members, without any objections, we'll go back into session. Yes, thank you for being here and thank you for your discussion. Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, committee. I know we got some members had to leave, and I appreciate you hanging with us here. Now we're kind of going around the world. This basically what we're trying to do here is we are protecting the students. Education, schools are about the students. That continues to go on. These are just 3 schools that are in geographic boundaries of a community called Germantown, and they would like to manage those schools. That's all we're trying to get on the table. With that, I would appreciate your support and renew my motion.
Thank you, Chairman White. Question's been called. Without objection, we will be voting on House Bill 2430 to send to calendar and rules. Members, let your ayes be ayes, noes be noes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it. Moves on to calendar and rules. Members, thank you for your patience, and I appreciate the discussion there. And with that, I will turn it back over to Chairman White. Motion to adjourn.
Members, we still have some bills on the calendar. I'm at the will of the committee. We still have another committee next week. Y'all like motion to adjourn? You'll keep going.
Motion to
We got a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned. All bills that we haven't got to will be rolled to next week's calendar.